Hello and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show, our first show of the new season. Obviously, we were a bit busy last week, didn't really find the time to do Bahrain, but we've got a double header now. Just as we had a double header, we'll be looking at the Bahrain Grand Prix and we'll be looking at the recent Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Two races that have sort of had this very similar conclusions to one another, but a battle between Verstappen and Leclerc at the front, Perez and Sainz a bit further back, with the Mercedes currently sort of in a bit of a no man's land. Obviously, Leclerc coming out on top with the two Red Bulls retiring in Bahrain, but Verstappen striking back in Saudi Arabia after last 10 laps of DRS strategy, DRS chaos. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about Mercedes. We'll be talking about Saudi Arabia because obviously it came with the backdrop of the dangers of that track, as well as the dangers of the political situation surrounding it. Then, obviously, moving on to Australia in 2 weeks. The first time we're going back there since 2019. Obviously, we're going to go there in 2020 before the pandemic really took hold. But obviously, I can't do this on my own. And as always, I've got my co-host Chinmay with me. How you doing, Chinmay?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Just what a good two races we've had, man. I'm looking forward for Australia now. So yeah, let's see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, and I mean, what would you sort of give those races out of 10? Obviously, looking back at last season, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, some of the best races you'd have to say of that season. Do you think these two lived up to that?
Oh yeah, they lived up to the hype, and I think it's definitely good that the regulations seem to be doing their job in terms of letting the cars come closer together. And just watching those battles a lot on Sunday was just something else fun. I just
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's really good to see, especially some new drivers at the top. And we are also joined by Saif. How you doing, Saif?
I'm good, Will. Thanks for having me on, guys, again. Yeah.
That's all right. And obviously, same question to you. Do you think these two races lived up to the hype, especially with what happened last season?
I thought the Saudi race was particularly good. I felt like the battle between Alonso and Ocon that really made the race for me. So I thought it was good. Real, nose to back racing or nose to gearbox racing, whatever they call it. It's great.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get started with some of that nose to tail racing. Obviously, coming into the season, we were unsure of who was going to be the fastest cars. But after these two races, I think it's really clear to see that Ferrari and Red Bull have cars that are very, very closely matched at the moment. And that has led to a real battle at the front between two drivers that are just 17 days apart in terms of age, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. I think definitely they're number one drivers in their teams. Obviously, Sergio Perez getting a bit unlucky in Saudi Arabia, but it does seem as though the title battle at the moment, especially, is gearing up to be a battle between the two 24-year-olds. I mean, Chime, how have you found that battle so far? Obviously, sort of a mid-race scrap in Bahrain. Obviously, 5 laps, a few overtakes. Charles Leclerc seemingly getting the better strategy-wise before Verstappen had his issues, but then Verstappen coming out on top in Saudi Arabia with a quite good strategy. Obviously, leaving the DRS pass for turn one and then holding the lead right into the end. Have you been enjoying the battle so far?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, it's just good to see it as good, really rough, clean racing. I think especially compared to last year when we had a bit too many collisions. I'm just glad that this season hasn't had any incidents yet. So, um, but yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, Safe. Do you think that obviously Chime mentioned there the clean racing, and we sort of got a bit of that last season at the start of the season. Obviously, Bahrain, Verstappen, Hamilton, fairly clean. Obviously, Verstappen getting that overtake. I guess Imola maybe a sort of a precursor for what we're going on or what would go on throughout the rest of the season. Verstappen forcing Hamilton off at turn one. Do you think this clean racing will continue? Obviously, both drivers seem to be enjoying it so far, but as soon as the gloves come off, so as soon as we get into maybe like race 10, 11, 12, 13, and it starts heating up, do you think that we will, as Jimmo said, get a few more incidents?
100%. they're really young, both of them. They're only 24. They've got that testosterone flowing. Leclerc is very hungry to win his first, and then Verstappen his second. I think it's gonna get worse. It's nice now to be happy for each other like they were, but obviously that goes under the table when you have a championship on the line, and that becomes more apparent later on in the season. So it's definitely gonna get worse.
Yeah, and obviously we saw in Bahrain Leclerc really get the better of Verstappen in terms of strategizing DRS passes in particular. Obviously, sort of letting Verstappen through at turn 1 to re-overtake him at turn 4, and then sort of Verstappen maybe sort of getting the better of Leclerc as well in Saudi Arabia, sort of they're both of them waiting to try and get that DRS down the main straight. Obviously, at some points, maybe it was getting a bit faster. Obviously, you saw them both locking up. I mean, do you think that the strategy will start to play a role, especially because it's so early in the season? It already seems like, because of the new cars and because of the power of DRS, that getting those DRS passes, especially if there's a back-to-back DRS zone, might not be the beneficial decision, especially in if you get the overtake in the first part.
I think patience is the key to win the season. You've got to wait for the right moment, because I saw Leclerc last race in Saudi. He was pushing and pushing and pushing, particularly at the start when he had the lead, and he's just savaging his tyres. And there's no patience there, and I think that's why Verstappen got the better of him. Particularly because his car is much better on the straights, and Saudi is pretty much flat out.
Yeah, and Chinmay, obviously last season we saw a battle between like a young pretender versus a wily old fox. Obviously Verstappen, the young, reckless, brash, bold driver, versus Hamilton, I guess now the cool, calm, collected, experienced one. And obviously those two styles really, well, they did come together on quite a few occasions. But now you've got two drivers that are fairly young, fairly not inexperienced, but fairly have the potential to get feisty. So do you think that it's going to be up to whoever sort of develops, as Saif was saying, that patience? Because at this point, it had Verstappen not retired in Bahrain, and we'll come on to that. If they hadn't retired, they would have likely been on level points.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, I think it might be to do with who becomes more patient, even though, to be brutally honest, I don't see any of them really becoming patient. There was one, maybe Charles Leclerc. So especially Max being the hothead he is, and especially from last year, we've learned that he will not let anybody give him any space or anything. You will not give anybody any space, is what I'm trying to say. And I think Leclerc, especially learning after Austria 2019, that I don't think Leclerc is going to be given much space either, especially when things do get feisty later in the season. So it'll be fun to watch, see what happens.
Yeah, and obviously a team isn't complete with just one driver. We've got Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. I think you have to say Perez was exceptionally hard done by at the race. Obviously, getting his first pole position, I think 210 races, now holds the record for most races before his first pole position and his first win. It was just very tough on him, because obviously pitting like a lap, it could not have been worse timed. Pitting a lap before Latifi binned it in the wall, obviously, stop under the safety car, a lot less time is lost. And it seemed really harsh on him, because he was driving a good race. He seemed to have the race under control. Do you think, I'll start with Chinmay, do you think that the second drivers might start to play more of a role? I mean, obviously we saw that maybe to a bit of a lesser extent last season with the dominance of Hamilton and Verstappen, but do you think that maybe this season they might have a bit more of an effect?
No, I think definitely yes, they will. I mean, especially if we're coming from the first couple of races as well, that Sainz and Perez aren't actually too far back. The maximum 5-10 seconds compared to a minute or even almost a lap behind sometimes, just with the league Max and Lewis were racing at last year. and then seeing them these two, especially when one of them is not on the pace because there'll be odd times that Sergio can't catch up to Max and or Sainz can't match up to Charles. It might even be the other way around. And then especially having that 2-1 advantage would really, really help with strategy as well. So yeah, I think definitely it would be a big role.
Yeah, and I mean, Safe, obviously, we mentioned there them potentially playing a big role. Do you think that Perez could have gone on to win that race had he not obviously been really hard done by with the safety car? And especially because that would have taken points off Ferrari. They would have, I think, I think it was first and fourth for Red Bull, second and third for Ferrari in the end. It could have been potentially a 1-2.
I definitely think that he could have gone on to win the race, especially because they ended up doing like the last 30 laps on hard tires. I know Sergio, he can really nurture those tires, make sure they make it to the end. So he's got the grip in the last laps. So definitely would have been feasible that he win. Very unlucky guy.
Yeah, and obviously we'll move it on to, I guess, just the teams in general now, because had Red Bull not had their double DNF in Bahrain, obviously very unfortunate for them. They would have come, I think it would have been second and fourth
Yeah.
in Bahrain. They would have got, how many more points is that? That's 30 more points. And they'd be, I think, just 11 points behind Ferrari. Do you think that we're going to see another Mercedes Red Bull situation where when the going starts to get feisty, when you start to probably get those incidents, because I think the consensus is they're almost inevitable. Do you think that we will start to see inter-team rivalry as well, like of the vein that we saw between Mercedes and Red Bull? Or do you think the Red Bull might do something different? Do you think it was just a drive to beat Mercedes, a drive to conquer the 7-time world champions, and now that they're fighting against another team that has not had a lack of success over the past few years, but hasn't been winning, hasn't been that dominant team, do you think they might temper their words, temper their actions a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, because last year it was all about David versus Goliath. And you really spirit up the team back home in Milton Keynes and stuff, and they really put in that extra effort because they're fighting this formidable foe. But now I feel like they're very much like on the same level with Ferrari in terms of people's mindsets because they're well-established teams, great histories, and they're both young boys with really good second drivers. It's almost identical, I feel. So it's not the same as last year.
Yeah, and I mean, Chimay, do you agree with that? Do you think that it's going to be a different sort of battle between Red Bull and Ferrari? Obviously, they've both been, for most years since the turbo hybrid era came in, they've both been the sort of pretenders that trying to challenge Mercedes for the crown. But now Mercedes out of the picture, and we'll move on to them in a bit. Obviously, they might get back into it. And if you were going to back any team to get back into it, you would back Mercedes. But at the moment, it is just Ferrari, it is just Red Bull and that is the battle that seems to be looking like it's going to last the entire season. I mean, do you agree that it's going to be a bit different to last year?
I think it will. I think that especially because last year was well, we're just extra motivated just to beat Mercedes because especially Christian Horner was extremely vocal that the main reason they really want to win is to beat Mercedes and get rid of that dominance. I mean, not to say that things won't get a little bit feisty, especially when you got the likes of Christian Horner in that team, who's really likes a good spat, good war of words, which I think F1 does need characters like him. But yeah, I think definitely it should be a different battle this year and a more pleasant battle.
Okay. And I guess just one final question quickly, maybe about the cars. So it does seem that the Red Bull has it's thrown off the whole thing about how we used to think 2017, 2018 Red Bull was the high downforce car. They were going to be the ones challenging on the street circuits, maybe at Singapore, at Monaco, at Mexico City, obviously at altitude. But they seem to have completely reversed it. Now they're the ones that have the super engine. They're the ones that are flying down the straights. And do you think that would play a role? Do you think that maybe we'll be looking at like Red Bull wins in Monza, in there are some Silverstone, especially obviously the fast tracks, but when we go to the slow ones like the Monacos, maybe Charles Leclerc can claim his first victory. Maybe he can do it in terms of bringing it back. But do you think that we will see sort of one team being dominant at one track and one team being dominant at the other, or do you think that they're going to sort of stick together in terms of how close they are between the two?
I mean, as long as Shaw does not bin it in qualifying, then I think he does have a good chance in Monaco. But I think, yeah, I think to be honest, they might be quite close together, and yeah, they could be quite close. But yeah, I think it's a bit too early in the season to really tell whether the Red Bull has a significant advantage in straight line or not.
And I'll just finish off quickly with you, Safe. Obviously, are you looking forward to the rest of the season now? Have these two races sort of brought up hopes for what it could potentially be a very, very, very good title battle, maybe even surpassing last year?
I don't think it's going to surpass the tightness of last year. And also, down in my heart, I'm not really looking forward to the season because I'm a Mercedes fan and it's not looking good. Like it's looking really bad right now. But in terms of the title fight, I think there's going to be good scraps between them. I think there's also going to be really good battles in the midfield. I think my focus is on the midfield this year because I feel like the racing is a lot closer. And you can see this in qualifying as well. There's so much shifting between who's getting their place in Q2 and Q1. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I'll quickly bring in a guest that has just arrived. Obviously, you know him, you love him. It's Jack. How you doing, Jack?
Hello, I'm doing well, thanks. Sorry I couldn't join you earlier. My computer decided it was time for an update, so...
That's all right. I mean, we'll come to you quickly. I mean, what are your thoughts on the Ferrari-Red Bull battle? Obviously, it has been a titanic one, and it's looking like it's going to be the battle of the season for the next few races at the very least.
Yeah, I'm really hopeful for it. I think especially the fact that we've had both the... I hesitate to call Sainz at least a second driver, but we've had four drivers really going at it, which is great from a neutral fan's point of view, and great for even those Red Bull and Ferrari fans, I think. So that makes me as hopeful as we can have something as at least as good as 2021.
Yeah, but two drivers that aren't going for it right now. Obviously, Saif was mentioning there being a Mercedes fan. I'm a Mercedes fan myself, and it's not looking good for the Silver Arrows. Obviously, in Bahrain, you'd have to say getting lucky to finish where they did. I think it was third and fourth in the end, obviously following the two Red Bull retirements. But Saudi Arabia, I think, especially exposing where that car is a distant third in terms of car performance over the Red Bull and the Ferrari. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton, his worst qualifying on merit since Silverstone 2009. So almost 13 years ago now. Qualifying 16th, obviously moving up to 15th following Mick Schumacher's withdrawal. George Russell, a distant fifth, I think. Like they're very much playing the old role that I think maybe Red Bull in particular played in 2017 and 2018. They're far behind what would have been, or like they are now. So they're far behind Ferrari and Red Bull and are sort of scrapping for those lower podiums. Maybe they're even like the Ferrari and the McLaren last season, but just don't have one another to fight with. Obviously, I'll come to you, Safe. As you mentioned, you're a Mercedes fan. First, it's a bit depressing, isn't it? It's like they seem to be no, and they also don't seem to have any idea about how to fix the car.
Yeah, there's something. Okay, so Lewis Cummings, 15th, or he finished the race in 10th, I think, and he didn't even know if there were points available for that role. That doesn't explain. Okay, the car I think is probably the third best car on the grid because George Russell, he put it there twice now. In fifth, I think he came. So I don't understand what's happening with Lewis, but yeah, the engine is just definitely not there. And last week, I actually had the privilege of meeting Andy Carroll, who used to be the head of Mercedes-AMG High Performance Powertrains. And he left when they started to basically fall off. So he left before last season. And I was asking him about what do you think's happening? And obviously he couldn't give direct answers because it's inappropriate. But he alluded to there's like a poor management structure right now over in Brixton, which I think is where the facility is based. Because it explains why all the other Mercedes customer teams are doing significantly worse than everyone else, to a concerning extent. So they really need to get the engine sorted out, I think, above everything else. I think the aerodynamically, the car is there.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned there the engine. So McLaren having a tough start to the season. Williams and Aston Martin, both Mercedes customers, and both haven't scored points so far this year. Is that all the Mercedes customers? Have I forgotten one? Or
Williams is. Did you mention Williams? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think Williams, Aston Martin, McLaren, and Mercedes. And Chinmay, it does seem like the engine is a bit of a problem at the moment. When you look at some of the practice timings, when you look at some of the qualifying timings, it is all the Mercedes cars down at the bottom, whereas you have Red Bull obviously making their own powertrains now, with AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri sort of midfield, obviously Red Bull at the top. The Ferrari engine looks incredibly good, obviously with Alfa Romeo and Haas sort of climbing from the bottom to definitely being solid midfield teams now. Do you think that, like as Saif alluded to, there may be a poor management structured, but do you think there maybe is something else wrong with that engine?
Yeah, probably. I think it's a mixture of both. I think there could be poor management structure, which could probably be hindering the development of the engine. If I'm not mistaken, the engines have mostly carried over from last year, haven't they, as well?
I believe so. Well, they're both
The
V6
engine freeze as well
hybrids.
coming into 25. I wasn't sure if it was from in effect last year or this year, but yeah, if that was the case, then there's probably two different theories. The engine's carried over. It's probably they turned the engines down because, especially the reliability issues they had last year, or probably the engine is just not powerful enough.
Yeah, and it is a bit of a concerning one, Jack, isn't it? Because obviously we do have that engine freeze coming until 2025. That will be three years potentially of a lack of performance from Mercedes. And I think you look back in the past to what have traditionally been the weaker engines. I think the Renault especially was always that one that was a bit further behind the Mercedes and the Ferrari, especially into the late 2010s. But now it's like you've never seen the Mercedes engine be the slow one ever since 2014. It's always been the dominant engine. It's always been the engine you want to have in the back of your car. But now it's the engine you don't want to have in the back of your car. It's the engine that is potentially costing you points and podiums and even wins in Mercedes' case.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk bad about the Mercedes engine for quite a while, but it's worth pointing out that Red Bull have gone the opposite way with theirs, haven't they? Obviously, severe reliability issues for AlphaTauri. They've only had two. In fact, one car finished the race out of the four possible, I think.
Yeah. Has Gasly finished? I thought Gasly might have finished. Oh no, Gasly retired. Yeah, I think, did Tsunoda finish the Bahrain Grand Prix?
No, both of them were out.
No, Tsunoda did finish Bahrain, I think.
So so we've had Tsunoda and Gasly finish their races. Obviously, the two Red Bulls retiring in Bahrain as well. So maybe potentially issues with the Red Bull powertrain as well. But it just seems like the Mercedes one, rather than lacking reliability, just lacks pace.
Yeah, I'm sure for those drivers who are unable to finish, it's frustrating. But yeah, I would rather have something that'll drive well for me and get me to lap 55 or 57 at least. Yeah, it's not looking great for Mercedes. Hopefully for the customer teams, either Mercedes will pick it up before the engine freeze comes in, or they'll switch to something that's they can put in their car and make better. Obviously, McLaren have had a habit of switching around recently, so I don't suppose it would. It's difficult for them. Obviously, it depends how much they feel is loyalty's worth at that point.
Yeah, and we'll bring it back to Mercedes. quickly, obviously, they've been the dominant team in F1 for the last 8 years now, maybe 2021, 2017, 2018, the closest anyone has come to knocking them off their perch. Do you think that they will recover? Do you think that they will start to improve and maybe do like, I don't know, a 2009 with McLaren, obviously starting off the season quite poorly before bringing it back? And that if Red Bull and Ferrari start getting a bit testy, do you think that they will start to maybe improve and maybe drag themselves back into the title fight?
I think they have the possibility to, just because like Mercedes as an organization, the Formula One team, Mercedes Formula One team, is just so large compared to all the others. Maybe the same size as Ferrari, but to everyone else, they just have resources that are so abundant. So I think that they can manage they will be able to turn it around, but I don't see them securing any place above third in the Constructors' Championship, to be honest.
Okay. I mean, Chinmay, do you agree with that? Do you think that third realistically is going to be where Mercedes finish this season, even if they start to improve and maybe do start to challenge Verstappen and Leclerc in particular for race wins?
Yeah, I think third might be the most logical place for them to end up being this year. But I won't be surprised if they do end up even higher, especially if Red Bull Ferrari do have a few problems heading later in the season, and especially knowing Mercedes' ability to redevelop car through the season. I think 2020, I mean last year itself, when they ended up going for the second fastest, and then they didn't manage to outpace Red Bull, and then I think 2018 as well, Sebastian was leading in the summer break, but then after that, because Mercedes outdeveloped Ferrari big time in their car, Lewis just ran away with the championship. So I think, yeah, definitely can definitely bounce back.
Yeah, and Jack, they've got two very capable drivers in the role. Obviously, George Russell coming in, putting in probably the best performances he can. He's in a car that's probably quite a lonely third in terms of performance. So realistically, without any issues, fifth is going to be his best option, and he's done that. He came fifth in Saudi Arabia. He came fourth, obviously, in Bahrain following the two Red Bull breakdowns. Hamilton, obviously, third in Bahrain, inheriting that podium, and then, but in Saudi Arabia, obviously, having a very poor performance, getting maybe a bit unlucky with the strategy. Obviously, he pits under that VSC, then everything could change, but doesn't react in time, and finishes down in 10th. I think it must be his lowest finishing position for quite some time. Do you think that the drivers will bring it back into the fight, even if the car maybe isn't as good? Maybe they're still a few tenths behind Ferrari and Red Bull, but the drivers can bring it back up. And are you impressed with how George Russell has started his season?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it even is the third quickest car, or not like just unequivocally. I think some races it will be the third quickest, maybe the fourth quickest at some others. But I think Mercedes' driver lineup is so talented that it's making it look like far and away it is better than their other competitors. George Russell, obviously his task is to go and be the next car behind Red Bull and Ferrari, right? The same way that, I don't know, Lando Norris had that same job last year. And I feel like he's doing the same job that we saw from Lando right at the start of the season, just being able to consistently put it the best of the rest. So if he's able to keep doing that, then great for him. But yeah, I will reserve judgment for a few more weeks, months, I think, because I think there's Hamilton not quite there on Sunday, and things are changing around a little bit.
Yeah, and obviously, Chinmay, as Jack was mentioning, Hamilton not there, especially at Saudi Arabia. And do you think this is, it might be a bit early to say, but do you think that this is the beginning of the end, the beginning of the handover, especially if maybe he has a few more races where he gets knocked out in Q1, and it's looking like Q2 is a genuine, or getting to Q3 is a genuine, difficulty for Mercedes, especially if they make the wrong setup choices? Do you think that Hamilton might start becoming a bit disillusioned, especially probably, I guess, the best example would have been Vettel in 2014 when he'd come from 4 straight world titles into a car that was, I think, the third best on its day. Obviously, having that young rival as well that had come into the team in Daniel Ricciardo, and now Hamilton's got George Russell to contend with. Do you think that maybe we'll start to see cracks appear in how he performs, or do you think it's a bit early to say?
I would say it's a bit early to say. Probably Lewis just had a really off weekend. I mean, even the greats have their days where they're not there. But maybe we could see this. I mean, it will eventually come where there is going to be a handover where Russell really does triumph over Lewis. It just whether it's how quickly it comes, to be honest. Especially with Russell, he's still developing as a driver. He's still really young. I know he's in his 4th or 5th season now. And
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
and I'll just sorry.
Yeah, but I think it'll just be a matter of time, really. Time will tell.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll just end it off with you, Saif. Obviously, Mercedes fan. Are you hopeful that they can get back into the title? Well, maybe not the title fight. Maybe if it takes too long, then it might have to be a write-off this season. But do you think that they can return to challenging for wins, maybe in the later stages of the season?
Yeah, I think they can return to challenging for wins, particularly if if safety cars and breakdowns are on their side. Hamilton, this was just a particularly off week, so I would say he's not as good as last year, but he's nowhere near as bad as Saudi Arabia made him out to be. So I think they can come back if they're lucky for a win.
Yeah, and hopefully for Mercedes fans' sake, they will start to improve. Right, we'll move on to the midfield now. Obviously, a midfield that has really been bunched together. I think with the possible exception of Williams and Aston Martin, you're looking at the other 5 teams being very close. Obviously, Haas and Alfa Romeo coming up from the depths last season, being the worst 2 teams, and are now very solid midfield runners. Alpine possibly underperforming their expectations, especially if they want to maybe get up there challenging for wins and maybe even the world title at some point. McLaren definitely underperforming so far. They were looking like a good team in Barcelona, and they just haven't really had that performance. And then, who have I forgotten? There's one team. I can't remember. Is that everyone?
Have you mentioned Alpine?
Yeah. AlphaTauri?
AlphaTauri, obviously having those issues, seemingly having a good car, but the mechanical side hasn't been going their way. I mean, I'll go around the guests quickly. Which team are you most impressed by out of those midfield runners? And then also, which team have really not lived up to your expectations? I'll start with Chinmay first.
I think the easy one, not living up to expectations, is definitely McLaren. I was pretty hyped for McLaren, especially when Barcelona, they were quick. They seemed to be the team that was the best dealing with the porpoising as well, that Mercedes works, which Mercedes probably has the worst of that effect. And then probably the one that's impressed me the most is Alpine, because I really didn't expect Alpine to really step it up this year. Or maybe Alfa Romeo could be a tie as well, because I think, to be really honest, I did expect Haas to at least make it to the midfield, especially because they sacrificed last year. But I think definitely probably tie between Alpine and Alfa Romeo in terms of who's impressed me so far.
Okay, yeah, Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'd hesitate to call McLaren a midfield team at this point. They feel like they're very much part of the backmarkers. But yeah, they've been especially disappointing. I expected Aston Martin to be bad, to be honest. I think that was expected. But I'm a bit disappointed by Williams. Again, not really the midfield, but I was hoping they'd take that big step up. They've had that investment, and they kind of... It felt like that was right for them. Like they were up on that upward trajectory, and they're kind of stagnating at the moment. And hopefully they'll be able to step up soon. But on the other hand, I expected Haas to be right down the bottom, and they've been right up there. And I think through all the trials and tribulations that Haas have gone through, they've been very well documented. it's actually made me like the team again. I liked them when they first came into the sport. I liked their lineup until about 2019 and started to go off it with the Drive to Survive stuff. But I've never wanted to hate them. It's just been some of the stuff that's happened.
I mean, and yeah, Saif, what are your thoughts?
Alfa Romeo have really done it for me, particularly because Bottas is my favorite driver. And I think Guan Yu Zhou, for someone who's new to the sport, he hasn't binned it into the wall, so I'm pretty happy with that. Like I said, I think Williams have been a particular disappointment, and I don't want to single people out, but Nicholas Latifi, I just personally have issues with him. Like, I mean, he just seems to be crashing the car all the time nowadays. Like, even at the end of last season, I mean, he binned it in Abu Dhabi as well, and so I think they were particularly poor performers. But McLaren, like, they have ruined my fantasy team because I paid so much money to get them, and they are so bad. Like, McLaren have just been, with all the investment and the business moves they made, like selling the McLaren Technology Center to try and fund this season, and then for it to end up like this, I think they're in serious trouble. Serious trouble.
Yeah, I think McLaren in particular have been that team that have really, really underperformed. I think there was sort of that expectation that Williams would sort of be down there, Aston Martin a bit, but McLaren, like, you were thinking they were going to be up the top, they were going to be battling for wins, and it just hasn't worked out. I mean, when you look at Daniel Ricciardo's career choices, you do start to cry inside. It's like the anti-Carlos Sainz. Like, there was a great graphic someone put in the WhatsApp group about how when Sainz arrives at a team, they peak. It's like, I respect his career choices so much because he has nailed every decision, whereas Ricciardo, especially after leaving Red Bull, probably the correct decision in terms of the management structure. Obviously, Verstappen, the golden boy at the team, and I think Ricciardo is a driver that's definitely on Verstappen's level, but wasn't maybe treated equally. I think it was a fair decision, but he's definitely gone back down. But one team that I've really been impressed by is Alfa Romeo. I think no one really gave them a hope, Chinmay. Obviously, we knew Haas had a chance of being up there. We knew they had a chance because they'd sacked 2021 off completely to focus on 2022. We knew that they had a chance, and then they proved it. They finished. Kevin Magnussen coming back into sport, performing exceptionally well, and we're getting the fulfillment of the Mercedes versus Haas memes, but just a bit bit higher up the field than I think people were expecting. But Alfa Romeo have always sort of been a team that have been a bit under the radar in terms of how they perform. But Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu in particular, or Valtteri Bottas in particular, and Zhou Guanyu as well, have really performed well this season. I think Bottas, on for another few points, had reliability issues not struck in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I think especially with like how, I mean, the Bahrain, the Alphas did not start well, but then the way how Bottas got from 14th to 6th on the grid, 6th place again after the first lap, it was just really good to see that at least most of the back market teams has made it back up the field again, and good to see Zhou Guanyu's actually putting in some decent performances as well. I think same with Haas. We can also say the same about Haas, like how I think probably because they also not just got rid of the sacrifice last year, they also got rid of the dead weight in one of the drivers and got back K-Mag, which I think even now is possibly the best decision they could have made in terms of driver choices they had. So it's definitely good to see the two other Ferrari customer teams just come back up.
Yeah, and Jack, they're on very similar trajectories. Obviously, you've got both teams, both Ferrari customer power, both with a young driver that's come up from F2, maybe one driver that's a bit faster than the other, both with an elder statesman that have returned to the team. Both elder statesmen being from Scandinavia. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen, Danish, Valtteri Bottas, Finnish. And do you think that those two might just be battling for maybe fifth, 6th in the Constructors' Championship, and that they'll both be happy with battling there?
I think there's so many teams just below Mercedes that we really don't know where they're coming in. Whether they're below Alpine or not is a question that to be solved. Whether McLaren can step back up because they've got quality drivers, and you saw Lando Norris was able to put some points on the board. So I don't think. I think it's too early to say. Yes, they're definitely in the fight. I think that's very clear. Even AlphaTauri, once they sort their reliability issues, there's so many teams in that kind of glut right in the middle. So yeah, depending on whether Zhou is able to keep up good work and not and keep it at the barriers as so often is an issue with the rookie drivers, whether Schumacher is able to step up and put some pressure on, obviously himself, keep it at the barriers. So luckily he's okay from what was a pretty massive accident on Saturday, but it's I don't want to put my money anywhere at the moment because there are so many teams with such I think the variety of drivers, the level difference is especially high this year. So trying to put them in the right place is very difficult.
Yeah, and we'll move on to what's the situation surrounding Saudi Arabia in just a few seconds. But I guess, Saif, just to finish off, who do you think will come out on top? Who do you think out of maybe those 5 teams we'd be looking at to crown probably 4th place in the Constructors' Championship this year?
I'm gonna say Alfa Romeo as is, but if AlphaTauri can sort out their reliability issues, the Red Bull powertrains can sort that out, I think they'll win, because I think that the drivers will make the difference when it comes to the midfield. And I think out of the midfield, AlphaTauri has the strongest average amongst their drivers.
Ahead of Alonso and Ocon, you think?
Oh yeah. Alonso's an old boy now, and them two, they're going to end up destroying each other. After what I saw on Sunday, they're going to have way too much beef. It's the same with Leclerc and Sainz. I think if Ferrari end up losing the championship, it will be down to their issues getting in the way. It's going to be the second version of the Silver Wars. So,
I mean, Chinmay, do you want to add something quickly?
I just want to mention, you got Otmar South and Alcine Principal, a pink car, and Esteban Ocon. And there's a Spaniard in the other seat. I think that's all. I think everyone knows this is a recipe for disaster. So,
yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Obviously, only the second race of the season, and as we were saying, they're very much up in the air in terms of how the midfield has gone. I think that'll sort of do in terms of the racing of the last two, and obviously in Bahrain, first race of the season, it was fairly calm. Off the track, but it really blew back into life the off the track politics in Saudi Arabia, starting off with what was a missile attack on a nearby oil processing plant, just 9 miles away from the circuit. I think during practice 1, the drivers meeting for 4 hours after practice 2, seemingly being persuaded to drive when a few of them maybe had a few reservations. Obviously, there has been issues with sport washing for a long time. The concept of regimes trying to legitimize themselves or legitimize their practices by hosting major sporting events. Obviously, we've got the World Cup in Qatar this year. We've got a potential F1 race in Qatar if they replace Russia on the grid, and obviously Russia themselves having potential sport washing with the previous World Cup in 2018 and their Grand Prix, and even Bahrain. Obviously, I think maybe there's not the hypocrisy coming in, but I think the fact that the Bahrain Grand Prix is so loved has sort of masked and maybe done exactly what sport washing sets out to do, has masked the potential issues that we've seen ever since 2011, obviously when that race was cancelled. So, Chinmay, do you think that we should have raced in Saudi Arabia? Do you think that following the attack, it was the correct decision? And do you think there was maybe some, not backroom deals, but some let's just say, gentle persuasion in the direction of the drivers that could have potentially forced them to do something that they didn't want to do?
Yeah, I think, honestly speaking, I don't think they should have. I mean, especially if there was a missile struck literally 6 miles away. That's in an oil refinery that is owned by a company that is a co-title sponsor of Formula One. Because if I'm not mistaken, that refinery was owned by Aramco, and that's a title one of the title sponsors of Aston Martin. I think just mainly for the safety. I mean, obviously the race went ahead, nothing actually happened in terms of safety issues or anything, but I think just for the safe side, they shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have really raced, and I think there must have been some sort of background persuasion. I mean, Formula One is not the first sport to be racing in Saudi Arabia on the back of political issues. If I'm not mistaken, WWE has also done that in the past as well with gentle preservation or something like that. But yeah, it's especially with knowing the human rights records as well, and especially with the stances that Formula One's going for, I do surprised how people like Vettel and Hamilton don't really push not racing in these places.
And obviously, Jack, if I'm not mistaken, this is the second time that a motor race hasn't been maybe the target, but has been has taken place under the backdrop of a missile attack. I think I want to say the Formula E last season had the same issue, but this time during the race, or at least that time during the race. So, do you think that Saudi Arabia just is too unsafe to race in? Do you think that regardless of whether the track is maybe safe, and we'll come on to that in just a few seconds, do you think that the country itself, especially with their human rights record, do you think that the country itself just isn't fit to host a Formula One race?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to say. I think with the government or the press saying or not having license to talk about it, I think that's what's most disturbing. It means that we don't have the information to make that judgment, and we have to assume. But in that case, my go-to is to assume the worst, right? People are covering something up for a reason. So if I'm going to take that approach, then yeah, I think it's a disturbing pattern, because it is a pattern now of events that we've seen. And if you don't know that you're safe or not, then you shouldn't be there. I think that's pretty clear. Yeah, it's a really difficult situation. It's not something that I want to be involved with at all. Everyone likes to say they're as ecologically and human rights and everything as possible, but I'd just like it to be not a question, if you see what I mean. Just clear enough that everything's okay. And if it isn't, then I will do everything I can to, which is not much, obviously, but to try and turn that around, to be as vocal as possible wherever it needs to be.
Yeah, and another issue was raised during the weekend. Obviously, after practice 2, they decided to qualify and then race. But in the qualifying, we saw a huge incident with Mick Schumacher losing it at turn 12, slamming into the concrete wall. His second large crash in as many races at the circuit. Obviously, didn't race in the end. And I mean, I've been reading that a lot of the drivers may be having concerns about the Saudi Arabian track itself being potentially just unsafe. Obviously, it wasn't billed as the fastest street circuit in the world, but I don't know about you or you three, but when I see the qualifying laps there, it's almost terrifying to watch how close they get to the walls, how fast they're going. Do you think that, or Saif, do you think that F1 has gone too far in terms of this track in particular? Obviously, it is unique. It's an exceptionally fast street circuit. It's the second fastest circuit on the calendar after Monza. But do you think it is safe? Do you think that, obviously, F1 has been driving towards safety. There's lots of runoff area. Maybe we criticize that at some points, but do you think that we've gone too far in the opposite direction and we've gone back to tracks that are potentially just unsafe for racing?
Yeah, the moment I knew that it was rather unsafe was at the Mick crash, because I think beforehand they actually widened the corner that he took when he that nicked his wheel that ended up binning him into the wall. And then also it was the extent to which the concrete block had moved, and they had to replace the whole concrete block there. And that was scary. That giant piece of mass had just been moved by this car, and there was a guy in it. Um, I'm surprised that he's safe. I'm actually really surprised. When I saw it afterwards, and when people were talking about, oh, he's speaking. I thought he was going to be like seriously concussed. But I guess he's okay. I personally don't. I don't like the track. I like the speed. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not too big of a fan of the visuals. You know, when you see them and they're just like sandwiched by walls, it doesn't make it that aesthetic to look at and to enjoy, in my opinion. But the
Hmm.
qualifying laps, especially from Max Verstappen, when you see the qualifying laps that he does, it's just crazy. It's something like another track doesn't give you.
Yeah. I mean, Jack, do you agree? Obviously, I think regarding the qualifying laps, especially once you look back at them and you know the drivers are gonna finish the lap, or maybe in Max Verstappen's case last year, not finish the lap. Once you know that they're safe, then you can look back on the laps and you can admire the speed, you can admire
Mm.
the precision of it all. But when you're watching it live and you don't know whether a car is going to go around the next corner, we saw a number of very, very close shaves. In terms, I think Alonso almost had one in qualifying. Verstappen in practice, obviously Sainz last year having two spins that could have potentially put him in the wall. These are the best drivers in the world. But do you think that the races or the laps can only be admired once you know the driver's going to be safe? And if it is that way, do you think that the track just isn't safe for modern F1?
I mean, I think that is a decision for the drivers and the teams and everything to make. It's difficult to say. Clearly, it's a street circuit. Every street circuit is by itself more dangerous than others. And there are certain other tracks on the calendar, Spa, for example, then that's also more dangerous. At the moment, it's bordering on more dangerous than others, I think, in my opinion. As for the question of laps, I think I'm maybe I'm too caught up in the excitement of qualifying. The laps themselves, to me, I just want to see, what the next sector time is. I'm not too worried about it. Yes, that was a huge accident for Mick. But I think realistically, how many accidents we have, 3 or 4 over the whole weekend? I think it's just about an acceptable number. If one of Mick's crashes happens every year, then of course, then that's too much. But the sample size is too small, and given that last year no one was seriously hurt, and he seems to be all right, I'll reserve judgment for a little bit longer.
Yeah. And I mean, Chime, do you think that we will return? Obviously, there are rumors of Saudi Arabia putting together another track, a track that looks absolutely hideous in terms of everything and it's got about 38 million corners. It's ridiculous. Do you think that we will be returning to Saudi Arabia, or do you think there will be that evaluation of whether it is right to race both on a circuit that doesn't appear to be safe, but appears to be as borderline as we're gonna get, especially in modern F1 in terms of its speed, its the need for precision in terms of driving, and then obviously with the political backdrop, of missile attacks and pressure and like press suppression and things like that. Do you think we will be returning to Saudi Arabia in the future?
I mean, personally, I'm not really looking forward if we do. But there's a chance that we might return to Saudi Arabia because of money. Formula One gets insane amounts of money from the Middle East races because of all the governments and stuff like that. So I think because of that reason we may see it back. But personally, I'm not really a big fan of the track, especially with the problem I have with that track is probably turns 1 and 2. It doesn't really give enough side-to-side action. But yeah, I don't do really good. I don't think that should happen.
Yeah, and I'll actually open the question up to Jack and Saif just to finish this segment off. Do you? I guess first off, do you think we'll go back, and then maybe do you want to go back to Saudi Arabia? Starting off with Jack.
I mean, that's a very difficult one again. I think probably because the race was good, because it went ahead, unless there are severe changes in the political climate in Saudi Arabia, I think we're going to go back. The track itself, I do think is really good. I think, yes, minor issue with safety, but I think it's unique. They've done a good job on it, which I didn't think I'd be saying this time last year. But no, I don't like the place. If I could take that and put it somewhere in Africa, somewhere in South America, wherever, just somewhere in a stable country, then I would go that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Saif, do you agree? And would you like Jack's, like, obviously it's a very hypothetical solution, but do you think that do you think the track would be good maybe in a country if it was like, if this was Kyalami, if this was like a race through the streets of Cape Town or Johannesburg, that you'd prefer it more? And obviously it gets rid of the issues that come with the politics.
Yeah, I think firstly, I think an Africa race would just be so awesome. But secondly, I think the track is stunning. The way it looks and the whole experience that they built for the fans, it's amazing, especially in person. Obviously, I haven't been, but from what I've seen, it's really stunning. But I don't want to return. I feel like there are levels to all of this because I feel like Formula One can be a force for change, making societal change. Like we saw the first female race driver from Saudi Arabia racing in the Alpine, was it? On Friday. But then again, like there are those social changes, but then there are Yemenis that are just being slaughtered in their masses by Saudi Arabia, and I feel like that's a step too far. That's something that Formula One cannot change. We can't go in there and have open arms and change that. That's something that needs to be changed before we even consider returning. In the same way we did with Russia, we didn't say, "Oh, we're going to go race in Russia and hope that they don't invade Ukraine by our own, us being there." I don't think it's feasible. I think it's actually irresponsible and it's contradictory. I don't want to return.
I think money. I personally, I'm a fan of the circuit most of the time. I think it's a bit borderline on safety. I think, especially turn 12 in particular, there were a lot of scary moments there, and obviously that's when Schumacher had his crash. I think it's a very unique circuit, and I think the fact that it is when it is such an edge of your seat, it's probably the most, like, especially last year and this year as well, it's the most like alive you feel while watching in qualifying, just watching them snake through just very tight walls. But obviously there is the safety issue, and then I think politically that's what pushes it over the edge for me. I don't think that, especially safety wise, you can't be going to countries that like the race could potentially be the target of a missile attack, and that is way too unsafe. And especially if some of the drivers have been forced to drive in the race, which it seems like did happen. It seems like there was some issues with maybe I think the report was discredited in the end, but there was an initial report from the BBC that said the drivers were reminded of how easy it would be to leave the country if they didn't race, which even if it isn't true, the fact that that's even a possibility, and it has happened before in WWE, is a bit concerning. And I think if the track was in Africa, I think that would be the best solution. I think I like the track. I just don't like where it is. I mean, does anyone else have anything to add quickly?
Nothing more. I just wanted to know more about is their new circuit going to be designed by Tilke?
I think so. I mean, I think I'd be more tempted to say that they might keep it here or keep it in Jeddah, because we've had two fairly good races in Jeddah. So they were, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But maybe they'll move it. We'll have to wait and see. And we will move on now to our predictions. Obviously, didn't manage to do any for the Saudi Arabia this week, so that will just be a bye week. But we had some Bahrain predictions. Obviously, it's me versus Chinmay in two teams. We each take a guess, and we make our own predictions of the top three, and then three random things that we think are going to happen throughout the season, and then give points based on maybe how specific they are. So I've got the predictions here. So we'll start with the podium. So obviously, me and Jack went for Sainz, Hamilton, and Russell in that order. We did leave off Leclerc and Verstappen, which may not have been the best decision. Obviously, Verstappen in the end. So we got Hamilton, I think, in the wrong place on the podium, but on the podium. Sainz as well in the wrong place, but on the podium. Obviously, Russell finishing fourth. But I think
if Leclerc had crashed out, then we would have been spot on, to be fair.
We would have, but if my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike. So you can't can't say that. I think personally, Chinmay wins out here. Obviously Leclerc, you got Leclerc winner, perfect. Hamilton on the podium, but in the wrong place, and obviously Verstappen. So I mean, I think that's fair enough. You got two right, but one perfect. We only got two correct. I think that's fair.
I believe you said there was 1 point for getting the driver on the podium right, and then 3 points if you put them in the right place.
There we go. So that makes it 4-2 to Chinmay so far.
Something like that.
Okay, and we'll go through the general predictions. So has to score points. We were right. How many do we think that's a 1-pointer or a 2-pointer, judging by how they performed before the start of the season? So I think making these 1 to 3 points, depending on how specific they are. I know it's my team, but I'm willing to listen. But I'd advocate for a 2-point. I think getting that correct worth 2 points.
I know I'm the opposite team, and I know I say 1, but this is not because of biasness, but it's only because I did expect Haas to get points in the first race.
Okay, we'll give it 1, and I think we'll also
this
give
was
1
after testing. To be fair, like Magnussen had already topped the times.
Okay, and I think we'll give the next one. I would say that Gasly had a catastrophic failure. That car set on fire. I think that's 1 point as well. And then the gap between the top two teams in Q3 will be more than a second, and it was... I've got it up here.
It was like a 10th.
Wait, the top two teams. Oh yeah, we were terribly wrong with that. No domination there. So that makes up.
I would argue for 2 points for the catastrophic failure.
I can't believe you.
Yeah, I'll give it 2.
That.
Yeah,
that's
all right.
insane.
I thought that'd be. Yeah. I thought first race, someone's gonna blow up. But,
the way
you got the name right. That's amazing. Like.
The way I wrote it on YouTube was both of us had like a 1 point, a 2 point, and a 3 point prediction. So you can see whether you stick with that or not is up to you.
That's a good idea. We'll keep that going. So we got 1 point for the Haas, 2 points for the driver to suffer a catastrophic failure. So that leaves us with
5 points. So
5 points. So we'll have to wait and see what Chinmay's predictions were. Vettel to spin in any session. Very good prediction.
Yeah,
completely
correct.
Did it get announced on Thursday? It's the Thursday curse.
It might have been Wednesday. It might have been Wednesday.
Just curse all the news in F1 happens on Thursday. So it's not great. Williams in Q3?
No, they didn't make Q3.
No, Albon qualified 14th, I think, and that was the highest.
Okay. And Magnussen finishes P8. Very specific. Where was he before the Red Bulls retired?
7th. I think he was P7.
Almost. Not quite. Does that mean we win? Yes.
Yep.
5-4. 1-0 to myself. And myself. Well, actually, yeah, 1-0 to me.
Yes, you.
Over
it's just
Jimmy.
you.
Right. What would... yeah. So, what we'll do
Are you
now,
adding up points over the whole season, or are you counting that as 1-0?
What do we want to do, Jimmy? You want to make it 5-4 or just 1-0?
Let's do it 5-4 in case we have an even number of races.
Okay. 5-4. And what we'll do now, we'll take a quick break. We'll make our predictions and we'll come back and tell them to you, obviously, previewing Australia as well. And we are back. We've discussed our predictions. Saif, unfortunately, had to run off, but Chinmay will be providing his team's predictions. And just before we do that, we'll preview Australia. Obviously, we haven't been back there since 2019. As I was saying earlier, it was meant to be the first race of the 2020 season before it was cancelled, like a few hours before it was meant to start due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The track has been reprofiled. Obviously, it always seemed to be a bit of a bland opener, in my opinion. I always thought, like, you get the hype of new F1 and then you temper it a little by sending them to Australia. But the track's been reprofiled, obviously. I think I don't know which turns it is. I want to say 7 and 8 might have been straightened out. So it's basically a run from 6 to the fast chicane. That could potentially now be an overtaking spot and could potentially lead to some spectacular overtakes. I mean, Chinmay, are you looking forward to going back to Australia and waking up at 6 a.m?
I'm not waking up at 6. I'm not waking up at 6 for the rest. As much as I love, there was the one time, I know the one time back in, was it Japan that had that storm and then they qualified at 2 in the morning and then the race. I actually stayed up for both things, but I don't think I can wake up at 6 this time around for the Australian Grand Prix. But yeah, let's hope.
I mean, you looking forward to it?
Yeah. Oh, and I just want to see more fighting. That's all.
Yeah, and obviously, Jack, do you think that the new track profile? I mean, if people don't know about it and want to get it up, they can. But do you think the new track could lead to more overtaking? Obviously, Australia's never been one for the overtaking scene, and it's good to see that they are thinking about how to improve overtaking. Obviously, with the new cars, maybe it will all be different.
Yeah, I think that they changed the penultimate corner as well, which is something they've done on top of that. I think maybe that's going to have more of an impact. It's a smaller change for sure, but I'm not sure how much overtaking the change to the sweep is going to make. It was never an overtaking spot to begin with, but whether or not it killed the momentum, I'm not really sure. At least it depends whether they can put a DRS spot train in there now. It's a difficult one again. I'm very hesitant to call whether or not it is. Like so many things this episode, it feels like.
We'll have to wait and see. Are you going to get up at 6 for the race?
Oh yeah, you're not having me miss Australia. Australia's great. I love it. Even if the circuit isn't the best, like the atmosphere and like there's just something about it. It's so good. Yeah,
the fact we haven't been back there for 3 years now, I think, makes a big difference as well.
I'll tell you what it is it's been the first race of the season for so long. I'm just like Pavlov dog, like so ready for it. I've been trained to be hyped. Yeah, no, it should be a good one. And we will move on to our predictions now. Obviously, predicting the top 3 and then 3 things that will happen during the race with increasing order of precision for an increasing amount of points. So, do we want to start with the podium? And I'll say we'll go first. I'll take the reins here. And we went for a Leclerc, Verstappen, Sainz podium.
obviously very, very similar to what happened in Saudi Arabia. Potentially, what could have happened in Bahrain had Verstappen not retired. And we think it's going to continue. We think the battle will be up there. I would say, if I was saying those three, I'd say Perez fourth as well, and then a Mercedes fifth, if I want to go even more specific. But we'll have to wait and see how it goes. Chinmay, what's your podium?
I've gone a slightly different one. Out for Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez. This is coming from the Red Bull fan here, so
Double Red Bull podium. Perez getting his first podium of the season. You're backing your Red Bull boys there.
Yeah.
Well, I have to wait and see. And then I'll let Chinmay, I'll let you go first with obviously your predictions. We've embraced Jack's brilliant idea of making a 1, 2, and 3 pointer on the prediction game. So why don't you start with your 1 and then move on to the 2 and the 3?
So my 1 pointer will be Tsunoda Q2. A bit of a simple one there. My second one is more for nostalgia. A Haas pit stop failure. It could be a slow pit stop, or it could just be the tire not being fastened properly, or something like that.
It's got to be very slow. I'm not having a 4-second pit stop.
Yeah, of course, it's got to be at least like 5-6 seconds.
Okay, and then your 3 pointer.
My 3 pointer will be an Alpha driver, Alfa Romeo, will hit P7.
Ooh, to be fair, you could have just said Alpha and argued the technicalities.
No,
but. Okay, we'll yeah, that sounds good. So Tsunoda in Q2, a Haas pit stop failure for that 2 pointer, and then an Alfa Romeo finishing P7 on the track. Jack, do you want to go for what we said for our 1, 2, and 3?
Oh, you need to remind myself now. Yeah, so number 1, both Aston Martins go out in Q1. For 2 points, Ricciardo scores points, which I'm not so sure it's going to happen, but I guess that's why it's 2. And then number 3, the turn 1 incident, there'll be 4 or more cars out of the race as a result.
It's
or
been
at
a while
least
since we...
Do you want to say out of the race or with like severe damage? I don't know.
Ooh, that's a good question. Chinmay, what are you allowing? Are we allowing severe damage? I'll let our opponent decide. Are we allowing severe damage?
A crash out.
They've got to be out of the race. I think Australia tends to be one where we sometimes see a turn 1 pile up. It's been a while. I think we're due one.
I mean, to be fair, it could be a good chance. If it's severe damage, you'll probably get caught on the gravel anyway. So,
well, we'll have to wait and see. And that has been the episode. Thank you to my guest and my co-host, Chinmay, for coming on. Anyone have any last words they want to say?
no?
Apparently not. They've thrown me under the bus there with the last words. But we'll be back next week with Chinmay hosting, and we'll have to wait and see what he brings. Obviously, an off week next week before we're back with the Australian Grand Prix. As we're saying, first time in 3 years we're returning to that, and we are all really looking forward to it. But that has been the Warwick F1 show covering Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and thank you for listening.